right then. I've been thinking about something. I have a lot of time to think right now, really. I'm in this camper most of the day if I'm not doing my chores and I'm not working. I will be working later this week. We're aiming for Wednesday to complete the work at the neighbor's place. Wednesday and Thursday are supposed to both be very nice days. And hopefully, we'll get our work completed on Wednesday. But if we don't, we still have Thursday. Thursday is also supposed to be a nice day. Anyway, having time to think, of course, is kind of a mixed bag. An old friend of mine one time, who had been around and had seen a lot, an older man than myself, had told me one time, he said, it's not good for a man to have too much time to think. And he was right. He was right about that, In many ways it isn't good. But then in some ways it is, because, you need a certain amount of time to think. He said it's not good to have too much time to think, and he was right about that. But he didn't say it's not good to think. He didn't say it's not good to take time to think or to spend some time in reflection and to think. And, he was right, though, when he said it's not good for a man to have too much time to think. But, because then you slip into a kind of a state that isn't good. You start ruminating over things, you start feeling resentful. You start remembering bad things that were done to you over the years, and you start remembering things that you regret, choices that you made that if you could go back, you'd do things differently and all that. And, of course, there's no point in that because that's all done. You can't change any of that. You can't change what was done to you 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, or whatever, or 50 years ago. And you can't change when you made a decision that took you down a path that you wish you hadn't gone down. You can't change that either now. You can learn from all of it, but you can't change it. That's the thing. Anyway, so there's no point ruminating on it. But it is good to have some time to think and to get things into perspective, and that's what I've been doing. And I'm going to tell you a story now that might explain to you why I am as defiant as I am on certain things, especially certain things that are happening now, which I believe are connected to the New World Order and to globalism and all that. And I'm going to just tell you about it anyway. When I was 14 years old, I've told these stories before, I was labeled incorrigible, and I was sent to a reformatory. I was sent to jail. And that had to do with a stepmother who pulled a knife on me because I was going to Mass, because I was Catholic, and she didn't like Catholics and all that. It's a crazy story anyway. I told a little bit about it in other videos. The woman pulled a Wilshire Eversharp knife on me, chased me down a long flight of stairs out of a building onto the street. Told me if I ever darkened her doorway again, she'd cut me into pieces. And this is because I had come out of my room wearing a suit on my way to go to Mass on a Saturday night. We used to have Saturday night Mass, And anyway, long story short, I got labeled incorrigible because of that, and I got sent to a reformatory in Kingston, Ontario. Now, when I was there, my dad, who had a lot of awful stuff in his background, a lot of awful stuff had happened in his life, and he was an old 1950s tough guy, He didn't talk a lot about the bad that happened to him, but it had happened. And he dealt with his emotions with alcohol and violence. That was pretty much it. That's how he coped, through alcohol and being a tough guy, And, but underneath that, he was hurting. He was hurting really bad, And sometimes he'd try to take his own life. He'd attempted suicide several times over the course of his life, And Anyway, when I was in the reformatory, he tried it again. And he ended up in the Kingston General Hospital. They shipped him from Perth to Kingston, and he was in there. And a psychologist came into the room. She was a young Asian woman. And she wanted to talk to him about his childhood and about why he did what he did and all the rest of it. And he didn't want to talk about that. Especially, he didn't want to talk. My dad had been raped by 2 Catholic priests in 1949 when he was 12 years old. That was the beginning of all the rest of the bad stuff that happened to him, and that happened with him, He didn't want to talk about that to a woman, much less to some little young upstart Chinese or whatever woman, psychologist. Anyway, she wouldn't take no for an answer. And so in order to get rid of her, he said an awfully racist and just a nasty thing to her. And the idea was just to hurt her and disgust her so badly that she wouldn't want to deal with him, so she'd go away. And that's what he did. He made a very nasty, racist statement to her, and she left. Well, then, to be punished for having done that, he was sent to the Ontario Hospital, which was the big psychiatric hospital in Kingston. It's gone now. It was torn down years ago, but that was an awful place. I actually went to visit him in there, and it was an awful place. But anyway, here's the thing. They found out somehow, probably my own fault, because I put in to visit him. Because I couldn't go anywhere on my own. I was in jail. So I had to put in to visit him, except when I was on a weekend pass away from jail. When I had that privilege, I couldn't go places on my own. And that's probably how they found out that they had his son locked up. They decided that they were going to use me to punish him further. This is the mentality of these people. And I got to endure 2 days of I was tortured. That's basically it. I was tortured for 2 solid days. They nearly killed me. They really did. They nearly killed me. Because they wanted me to say that my dad had done things to me that he hadn't done. My dad had a wicked temper, and he wasn't shy about using his fists. And my dad, when I was a little boy, he used to beat me. And he beat me severely. I mean, I was knocked unconscious more than once. And that wasn't altogether unusual in those days. Back in the early 70s, we were still living in that old era where that's how things were. When you were growing up, especially if you were a boy back then, it wasn't uncommon for your dad to beat you. And my dad had beat me. He'd beat me. And I never denied that. Now you got to take it in the context of the times. I don't think you can judge somebody who did that back then as harshly as you could judge somebody who does it now. But still, he did it. So I'll acknowledge that. My dad was a good man in a lot of ways, and I love my dad. And I know my dad loved me. But my dad was dealing with a lot of stuff, and he didn't always deal with it very well. And like I say, he didn't have the opportunity to deal with it very well either a lot of the time. Because in that era, you were expected just to shut up, grit your teeth and get on with it. That's how it was, And too bad about your trauma. Nowadays, people revel in their trauma. We've gone to the opposite extreme, where people revel in it and they use it as an excuse not to succeed. They use it as an excuse to be a failure. Not back then, though. It was just the opposite. It was suck it up and get on with it. That's how it was back then. Never mind about your trauma. It was the opposite, which was also unhealthy. Anyway, they wanted me to say that my dad had molested me, which he hadn't. My dad, he'd take his fist, he'd knock me out, he'd punch me out. But he never molested me, and I wasn't going to say he did. And those people, they beat me, and they threatened me, and they didn't let me sleep. They didn't let me eat or drink or go to the bathroom, and I had 2 days of that. I was locked in a little room, and they'd come in, and they had beat that. Well, anyway, they beat me. That's the bottom line. And I was told that I wouldn't leave that. At one point, I was told I wouldn't leave that room alive unless I told them what they wanted to hear. And I believed them. And I still didn't tell them what they wanted to hear because I would have been bearing false witness against my dad, and I wouldn't do that. After 2 days, they gave up on it. They gave up anyway after 2 days. They realized I wasn't going to crack. But see, that's where I come from. So I learned to be that way early on. But those are the kinds of situations I found. I was just turned 15 when all that happened. And those are the situations I was dealing with. By the end of that year, I was really pretty much on my own. By the end of that year, I had left home, and I was pretty much on my own. Anyway, the bottom line is this. That was 1983, 40 years ago. 40 years ago. Anyway, the bottom line is this. If I were to go along, if I were to do what the people want me to do, and be the way the people want me to be, I'd be far better liked than I am. I'd be approved of more. I'd probably have a far more physically comfortable life. I'd probably have more money. I'd have more comfort. I'd have more security. All of it. Women might like me better. I might be a better prospect for a woman. There's all sorts of things that, would probably be a lot better in my life. People would generally like me better. They wouldn't see me as obstinate and stubborn and opinionated and stupid and a criminal and probably all kinds of other evil things. But you know what? I wouldn't like me. That's the whole thing. I wouldn't like me. They'd like me. I wouldn't. And the thing is, if you don't like me, you can walk away from me. You can just turn around and walk away from me. I won't follow you. You don't have to deal with me. But when you turn around and walk away from me, you're going to take yourself with you. Thing is, if I turn around and walk away from you, I'm going to take myself with me. I can't get away from myself. If I don't like you, I can get away from you. If I don't like me, I'm stuck with me. That means I've got a constant companion who I don't like. I'm hanging out with a guy I dislike constantly if I do that. So it's more important to me that I like me than it is that the other guy likes